Welcome to the Missouri 811 and Kansas 811 podcast. I'm Nick Reza with Missouri 811, and this is my good friend Art York from Kansas 811, and he's here to tell you a little bit about what's going to be on these podcasts.
Great, thanks, Nick. Really looking forward to these podcasts. Nick and I decided a couple months ago that we wanted to put a podcast together, invite some friends, some clients, things like that from across the industries, from utilities, locators, excavators, and we want to talk about what's going on in the field. We thought it would be a great opportunity to hear some of the success stories out there, maybe some issues they're having. We plan on talking about a little bit of everything from what we've done in the past. Nick and I both have a background in utilities and locating, and now we've both been in the one-call industry for the last 8-10 years. Worked together on a lot of projects, so we wanted to partner up and do this, and so welcome. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please let us know if you're ever interested in being part of our podcast. Reach out to Nick or I. We'd love to have you on, but we really like to have a lot of good guests with a lot of good knowledge out there so you can take something away from it. Also have a little bit of fun while we're doing our podcast. So thanks. Sit down, relax, enjoy the show, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Art.
All right, well, welcome to our third podcast with Missouri 811 and Kansas 811 with Nick and Art. My name's Art York. I'm with Kansas 811.
I'm Nick Reza. I'm with Missouri 811.
And our guest this morning is Rex Schick. Rex, thanks for taking the time this morning to talk with us, and we're looking forward to this podcast for a while. You've been in the business for a long time, and if you don't mind, just kind of introduce yourself to kind of tell us who you are, where you're from, and how everything began.
So, as Art said, my name is Rex Schick. I'm just like the razor, but not sharp. So, I started in the construction business with begrudgingly with my dad, having to work with my father. My dad was a contractor. So, doing underground construction was something that I grew up with. So obviously, if you're working underground, you're going to work around lines, and, underground damage prevention is a big part of that and a high priority of that. And, for me, it started back in the days when I was a young guy, pretty close to buggy whip days. My evolution was basically my father was a contractor, as I said, working with him in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, and then my father had some health issues, so he had to retire. And my brother-in-law and his brother actually started a company called K&W Underground with my father's equipment, and it was kind of natural for me to start working with K&W Underground while I was still in high school, and evenings and weekends and that kind of stuff, and that's what I did. So
what was your dad's specialty? What did he mainly do contracts for?
My dad did telephone work and plumbing work, underground, sewer lines, that type of stuff primarily. He wasn't ever a very big contractor, just kind of a owner-operator type, but that's where I gained my experience.
Mainly just like backhoe equipment, that's where it's
backhoes, trenchers primarily, trenchers and backhoes. Okay. Yeah, small trenchers, that kind of stuff. Did work for Southwestern Bell at the time. Did plumbing work for homeowners and sewers, and basically whoever paid me to do the digging for them.
Right.
In some ways, I just call myself kind of a Kansas ditch digger.
Yeah, there you go.
So it's what I do, what I've done. So with K&W, I started out working in the field, doing trenching work, and we primarily did telephone work for most of the time, but we also did water line construction to rural water districts and that type of stuff in the late 70s and early 80s. And my role in the company continued to kind of evolve from field work to management, and so In 1980, I actually became vice president of K&W and a minority owner, and that was my start, if you will, with running a company. And so in the 70s and 80s, basically that's what we did. Was we primarily focused on cable television type work in the Johnson County area, Kansas City metropolitan area. And
so Rex, to back up just a tad, when you got into it, you said you were working, nights and weekends while you were in high school for the company and doing different things like that. So is that something you just kind of, that was what you did, or had you thought about doing different things like going to college, different things like that, or was it just a family business? And kind of what I'm alluding is, obviously you've built a very great career over the years in the underground world, very well respected, but for the young listeners that are out there, I mean, there's opportunities out there. Obviously you got a lot of on-the-job training, but did you realize pretty quick it was a pretty good fit for what you wanted to do?
Yeah, obviously it was natural for me. It's what I'd grown up doing. I went to school in Olathe, and I played football in Olathe, and I had some opportunities to go play football in college. And also through college, I was working for a bricklayer that happened to ultimately be my father-in-law. So another family business. So I was helping him kind of work summers and evenings and weekends and stuff like that as well. So I had a couple opportunities to I guess decide what I was going to do for a career. And I really thought I was going to be a brick mason at the time. And that didn't really seem to work out. So as a result, it was kind of natural for me to start or continue in the underground construction excavation business in some form or fashion.
So when you became the minority owner of K&W, you kind of took that off. Did you really sit and look at the business, how you could expand it, or kind of what got you into becoming one of the premier excavators in the Kansas City area, especially? But I know you guys did quite a bit of work in other areas, but.
I wish that I could say that we had some grand plan.
Yep.
Right.
But we didn't.
Okay.
We basically ran the company by the seat of our pants.
Sure.
My brother-in-law was the administration side of the business. He was the majority owner. He ran the office, did the administration side, banking, insurance side, that type of stuff. I was more the operation side of the business. So, I would schedule the crews and do those kinds of things. So, the expansion of K&W really happened kind of just organically. Okay. We'd work with our customers, and one of the things that we did that I think helped us out a lot was we would meet with our customers at the end of every year and kind of discuss the future. What was the future? Do they need more services? They need less services. They need different services. And really that's how we grew, was requesting from our customers what they needed and delivering that in some form or fashion. And whether it be, underground construction, whether it be, splicing, whether it be, pulling cable, or, doing technical work, or doing testing work. So you guys
turned it a one-stop shop, basically, then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, wasn't no grand plan. It was just go into your customer, ask them what they needed, what they liked, what they didn't like, obviously change that, and be able to deliver on that. And so that's kind of how we just grew organically. One of our customers says, we're expecting to do X amount of work next year, so we just plan to, add crews to do that kind of work and hire people and buy equipment and do all that. And so that's kind of basically how we grew in the 80s and early 90s, was, through organic growth. in the Kansas City metropolitan area. And so that's basically the kind of the evolution. We focused on telecommunication type work.
Sure.
We quit doing rural water districts, and so that helped us kind of focus, our energies and efforts in the area. So it really was an evolution.
Sure.
More than it was a grand plan.
Well, that makes sense.
So it worked out, so that's good.
And Arch, I was going to ask, we talked a little bit before we got on camera today about how it used to be before a one-call system was generated, and I'm sure you worked in those days. Can you kind of tell the listeners kind of how the one-call system has kind of improved overall damage prevention and made life a little easier?
Yeah, maybe even an example of how it was.
Yeah,
when it
yeah,
started.
absolutely.
How'd you guys avoid damages back in the day? How'd you do it?
Well, the reality is that there was no one-call system. You had to contact each individual facility owner directly and schedule a time to meet them on site for them to mark their lines. And the facility owner had a representative come out, so it was a long process to get a locate completed. And if you had multiple locates, what we would do is we would schedule a meeting in the morning, and we'd try to get all the utility companies to come to the same location. And then we would just train to the next one and the next one and the next one. And as a result, I got to know the locating community very well, because we spent all day together on projects, locating this, locating that, meeting, helping them in some cases do their locates so we could get it done, so we could get on to the next one. I had a lot of experience working with the utility company locating their facilities. That's the way it was. Obviously when the one-call system became available, that simplified it. But even at that time, there wasn't, quote, contract locators.
Sure.
You still met with the representative that was most generally an employee of the facility owner. They had the knowledge of their network. They had the maps. They were, proficient at their job, and so it's kind of the evolution of that. Really was, then it was a contract locating service that located for multiple companies that we currently have today.
Sure. That's kind of where Nick and I we got started in our career, was in that contract locating side of the house. But back then, when you would meet with those reps, you were out there on the job site. How accurate were the locates? Did they have obviously today the technology is just, it's crazy. It's still not an exact science, but it's definitely improved over the last 30, 40 years. But back then, could you get good accurate locates, or was it?
I believe that they were as accurate or more accurate than it is today.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because they knew their network.
Yep.
And they had their maps for their network.
Right.
And they, one gentleman I recall was with Kansas Gas Service. His name is Lynn Young. Best locator I've ever known in my life. He kept meticulous records of everything he located, and just did a wonderful job, and very accurate. So I believe that back then the locates were done, accurately, maybe even more accurately than it is today.
And when you had your crews out there, you had marks on the ground that was located. Did you have any kind of policies or procedures in place for your guys to find those utilities prior to digging over them? As we know today, there's tolerance zones, hand dig zones. You're looking for that utility in the ground. Was that procedure started back then?
It did. You know, we'd hand dig through those areas that had marks.
Sure.
Just like today, for all practical purposes. Although today we have vacuum excavation equipment to be able to do it more efficiently.
Sure.
Instead of a shovel. And in a lot of cases safer for the utility than a shovel. But really didn't really change. You still potholed. I think the major change really would have been we really didn't do any quote positive verification of the marks.
Right.
We dig across the marks at whatever prescribed depth that we needed, and we'd move on. We didn't find the utility.
Because it was more open trench back then, right?
Primarily open trench. Yeah, open dig, either with a trencher or a backhoe, or in some cases cable plows.
Sure.
So, but we didn't do any positive verification in those days. We just, passed the marks and continued trenching.
So the process then to get locates, obviously, it had to be part of your planning. I mean, you had to plan your job out and allow that allocated time to get your locates done, not just a phone call and 2 full working days, for instance.
That's correct.
Yeah, interesting.
It is.
Yeah, so it took a lot more time, I'm sure. So when you're out there with you guys in the field, you're looking for that stuff, you're crossing it. Did you find that? What about the bearing of the actual facilities? Is there a difference then than there is today? And kind of what I'm alluding to is I see a lot of excavation take place now, and it's kind of almost more of a go and blow. It's you don't see a lot of inspectors like you used to necessarily, so you're never sure exactly how that was placed in the ground. I seen, even in my career, I found that early on, I could be pretty confident if I was going to locate a mainline cable for a telecommunication that it was probably buried pretty accurately on depth and where it was at, and usually a straight line shot versus now I see it's like, whew, somebody must have been burying this, getting paid by the foot, not the job, because there's no rhyme or reason to how this put in the ground. Do you see a difference then versus today?
I do. I think the standards certainly have been lowered. Some companies continue to have high standards, but a lot of companies, all they really seem to care about is not necessarily the quality of the construction, but how quickly it got done and what the cost was to get it done.
And in my opinion, and probably your guys too, that impacts future damages and protection of that utility, I would assume. I feel that if it's properly placed, it's easier to protect later, and I think sometimes people lose that sight of what's going to take place later. And it kind of goes into a little bit of a discussion about design. I assume that when you were planning this stuff for these companies you work for, you were in part of the design process or involved with that, and we see that more and more right now, and the design process is very, very important. So we know, there's no reason to bury this cable on this side of the road with 5 other utilities if you can bury it on the other side, and there's not a utility or maybe one, and that only helps in the future of protecting it. But when you were you involved with a lot of the customers on the planning and design of their plant? Certainly
involved into that. K&W provides engineering services,
right?
Design engineering services. Yes. The criticalness of a good quality plan will facilitate the project getting completed efficiently. If you have a good plan, good design, then the likelihood of the project getting completed on time and accurately is much greater. That's what I found, and so putting the time in to do it and to plan it properly to start with pays you over the project time frame.
Right.
And in my current role, Fiber Conduit Solutions is the company. What I do for that is consulting telecoms on existing conduit routes that are available to purchase or lease. And there's millions of feet of conduit out there that's empty, vacant conduit, and that's been put in over the years for spares and or abandoned in some cases. And so trying to coordinate, if a telecom wants to build from point A to point B, and to coordinate the use of those vacant conduits is what my role is today.
That's very interesting.
It is. I didn't
Because
realize.
locating, I know that there's a lot of those out there, and if you're at liberty to say, I mean, how do you know where those are and how to guide these people with that?
Well, that's what it takes, local knowledge.
Yeah.
Who has it? Fortunately, over the years, I've had an opportunity to work with almost every telecommunications provider in the Kansas City metropolitan area and beyond. And as a result, have relationships with them so I can contact them, request, whether they have any vacant conduits for this particular area. And as a result, be able to, communicate that to other customers. I can be kind of the go-between, if you will, between, one telecom and another telecom. And the other thing that I do is promote joint trench work. So if you have one company that's wanting to build a route and they want to partner with that, then I'll reach out to my other customers to see if they have any interest in building that particular route. And so that's a service that I provide today with Fiber Conduit Solutions. And
I can see that being very important, because obviously the right-of-ways are filling up. There is just, I've even heard different counties or different cities talking about widening the right-of-way, the utility right-of-way, just because there's too much stuff in it. And now you're talking, I assume there's a lot that goes into that, especially if you have to encroach on the private, but it seems like every right-of-way anymore is full. So I never really thought about that side of the business where there is empty conduit, because you're right. I remember putting bundles of conduit in for one fiber, and so that's just, they're laying in there dormant.
Yeah.
And if you can utilize them, it just cuts down on the excavation in that right-of-way.
which in turn cuts down on the likelihood of damages to other utilities.
Absolutely right.
Damages to property, damages to the right of way, damages to streets, the traffic congestion. It just eliminates so many issues, and to be able to utilize that conduit. So it's kind of a common sense. If you can do it, you need to try to take advantage of it. And so what I try to do is facilitate that with my customers.
And the common trench stuff's big too. It seems like for a long time there was a big push for that, and then it kind of went away for a while for some reason. I don't know. Do you think it was because of just the planning part, or was it proprietary information, or? But I have seen more people talk about it now.
The joint trench part really is a planning issue primarily. It's kind of like herding cats.
Gotcha.
Everybody has their own process to go through, and they have their own budgetary process. They have their own approval process. So when they build a project, the timing of it might not align with when the construction needs to get done.
Sure.
So that's the biggest challenge with joint trench type projects, is whether company A wants to build it now and company B doesn't have the process down and the approvals to go ahead and build it. So it's kind of a give and take there. And so the other part of the equation is there has been some studies done that telecommunications get affected by high voltage. So the separation between power and telecoms is really pretty critical to make sure that you don't that effect doesn't have a negative effect on the telecom.
Sure.
My focus primarily is on just telecom joint trench
Gotcha.
to get telecoms. And it's becoming more and more valuable because there's more and more telecoms in a particular area.
Right.
Used to be, you know, the old telephone, cable TV was primarily the service providers for that particular area. Now you can have 4, 5, 6 companies go into one particular area or subdivision.
So that actually kind of brings up another topic, and it would be the locating of those facilities. Could be a challenge I could see. Maybe we talk about that a little bit. I know, but when I was a locator, if I had a contract to locate both the facilities that were in the common trench, it was great. But if I only had one of those facilities and someone else was locating the other facility, it became a challenge. And I could see that being a challenge a little bit if we had 5 telecommunication companies, and let's say 3 different locate companies to mark those, of the accuracy of hooking up, because now you're needing to put 1 orange mark, but you may have to have 5 orange marks versus that. So when you work with your customers, do you talk about that part of it, of the protection of it later, or is that kind of outside the wheelhouse?
I bring it up because I think it's an advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Group numbers, the chances of a bad locate are greatly diminished.
Mm-hmm.
So I discuss that as a value. I don't discuss their procedures to market.
Right. Okay.
But it's a good point that, you know, they should know there's more than one conduit in there.
And I think that goes back to utilities having good maps and having that it's in a joint trench, because the older maps used to have that. If it was in a joint trench, it'd say that. And I think sometimes as utilities move away from marking lines themselves and use contract locators, it seems like they kind of get away from having really good maps. And I think that's something we preach to utilities all the time, is, hey, make sure you're updating your maps and making sure they're correct.
Well, we got to give good information to the excavator. The excavators, they've done their job. They've called. They've waited a proper amount of time. They need to understand in the field what they're digging over.
Yeah.
If they just see one set of orange marks and don't realize that there's 3 or 4 different conduits with different fibers in there.
But I do agree with you. The chance of damage greatly diminishes because it's all in one.
It's all there, right?
Yeah.
I think mapping is one of the areas that we could improve greatly and reduce damages because of it. I don't think there's any question about it. We have the technology today to capture via GIS information accuracy down to the millimeter, the depth, and the location of facilities when they get buried. What I've found is most companies are not capturing that information today. 20 years ago, it was very expensive to capture. Today, the technology is there. You capture it with a locator.
Right.
And to me, that is the future of mapping and damage prevention, is unless that satellite falls out of the sky. And if it does, then we got a lot bigger problems than trying to locate something. Right? Then our generations and future generations will know exactly where that utility is.
And I've talked about this before with Arch before, but excavating to me, it used to be done with open trench backhoe. You probably were only getting a couple hundred feet a day. And now with directional drills, you're getting, 1,500, 2,000 feet a day, probably more. I don't do it a lot. But I guess my point is there's a lot of technology in locating now, but it doesn't seem like that's getting implemented as fast. Like, it's still a pretty labor-intensive process for locators to go out and really be faster than they were back in the 80s. It seems like they need to catch up a little bit with how much they can do in a day versus what, excavating has really made strides to get faster.
I think today the locating is using technology really that's about 100 years old. And they've improved on it. They've improved on the accuracy of it considerably. but it's still radio frequencies.
Right. Yeah.
It's still collecting a radio frequency that says this is where it's at, and in some cases, this is how deep it is.
Sure.
That's where I think GIS information could revolutionize that,
Right.
if people would adopt it. And one of the recommendations that the Legislative Affairs Committee recommended to the Kansas Corporation Commission is that that becomes standard, that any new installation gets captured with GIS. And over a period of time, then those maps would be developed by the facility owners. It's not being adopted. It's not been adopted. But I believe that is the use of that technology could revolutionize locating and the accuracy of a locating.
Well, that's it. Arch, do you have any final words?
No, just want to say thank you for joining today. Appreciate your time. Hope you got a little knowledge out of it, had a little fun. See you next time.
See you next time.